she has enough hard drives.
Yeah. So that's what I wonder. I have no idea what my phone would, how long it would last.
Mine's full of stuff. It's not as bad as my laptop though. Ever since I was a little kid, that's what has been the death of my laptops. I've overloaded my hard drives. I was killing from heat exhaustion.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. How are you? I see now we are all settled and we can start. I've been informed that whoever is to be here is here already, so we'll close the door. So, I'm Dr. Churchill, and I wanted to thank you very kindly for being here early in the morning on this beautiful Hawaii day. I also wanted to offer some praise to our wonderful friends at the Pacific Forum for inviting me and making this possibility available for us to communicate. I shall particularly enjoy to thank Ralph Cosa, who is the executive head of this organization, that they've been doing wonderful work since the founding by Admiral Fassi of this think tank that allows us to pursue the opportunity for peace before we devolve into other means of diplomacy. Mr. Carl Baker is our host today, and I want to thank him for providing this venue. And of course, my dear friend, Christopher K. Cheers to you, man. Thank you very much. He's a conservative bastion in the cities of America. And all of you who come to listen, you must be reminded that I have a purpose that I speak, and I'll give it a stated purpose. This is a discussion about security in the Pacific. My purpose of speaking is so that we can ascertain with strength that we shall never have another Pearl Harbor as we had 75 years ago. Perhaps you who have been involved in military affairs or diplomatic affairs, you will know, even as citizens and civilians, that a nuclear Pearl Harbor is nothing we can overcome, not easily. So to avert this dismal potentiality, we should throw back history away from what many people call inevitable and understand that history is created by men and women who are strong enough to stand against the tides and to fight as akritas. Now, does anybody know what does akritas mean? The word akritas. Anybody who knows military history must know that. It's an ancient Latin and ancient Greek word. So akritas are the warriors who, upon their retirement, they are given a plot of land on the reaches of the empire, the Roman Empire, or the Byzantium, in order to defend that forward-reaching territory. So, I'm honored to call all of you akritas, because you live at the farthest reaches of the United States of America, and you are defenders of what you commonly consider where our position is in the Pacific. We do not have that many assets in the Pacific besides the center of strength, which is the Hawaiian Islands. But we do have to rely upon wonderful people like yourselves, that from today on, you've been anointed with a new name, akritas. Congratulations. So, let us consider two things. Of course, we know that today we don't have empires any longer. My grandfather was a defender of the empire, but he was also able to say that in the future we shall not have any longer these empires of the old, but we will have what we call the empires of the mind. And I truly believe the United States of America today to be an empire of the mind. An empire that's based on the greatest possible ideas, on the strength of our ideas, on the strength of our principles, on the strength of our science, on the strength of our technology, on the strength of our military might, but above all else, on our strength that is based on the principles of the law, a law that we adhere to, a law that we respect, a law that is foundational based on our constitution and based on the way that we understand the framers to have wanted to give us these original ideas as an experiment in mankind. You know, these great things Abraham Lincoln, used to tell us. Government by the people, from the people, and for the people. We are the ones who personify this on this earth. And although it's an ancient idea, the only valuable example that we have of this fully blossoming is the United States of America. So that we all have to defend. And they are critters, people like you. They have always been the greatest defenders of the constitutional value of the empires of old, of the empires of the mind, like the United States is today. So let us not underestimate the value that we have to place upon you to defend our principles, to defend our conservative values, to defend our capacity to continue this experiment of democracy in our republic for the next generations to come. I do not represent anything political here today. I simply want to tell you that I speak as an American, as a patriot, and also as a person that involves himself in politics, running for office, simply because I want to do good things for this nation and to serve. And then I will go back to my farm, because I have a good job. And I believe that service should be done, because if we do not choose to serve our country, we are bound to be governed by people who are inferior to our capacities. So, being involved in matters of security is of paramount importance, even though people might say, but you're not a general, you're not an admiral, what right do you have to talk about security? You see, there is a dichotomy of the person here that we have to address. We all have the right, as actors, in where we are, to speak about security, because that is the lifeline that will allow our constitutional republic to continue in existence. Today, we face threats, as always. Thomas Jefferson, back in his day, he said, I don't know, but there are people who are trying to tear us apart. I don't know who they are, or at least I will not name them. And today we face the same things. But how do we solve these problems defines us as being Americans. How do we choose to involve ourselves in the solutions that we seek in the Pacific? Not just for our security, but for the security of all the nations around the Pacific. It defines who we are. So again, I go back to the idea, what is a nation? A nation is not us. True, in some ways, we are part of a nation. But the nation is this unwritten agreement between the people who have come before us and the people who are yet to be born. And we are the custodians, we are the guardians, we are the watchmen, we are the minutemen, that we have to secure this nation for the children yet to be born. And if that's not an awesome responsibility, I don't know what it is. So let us not forget that when we talk about security in the Pacific, we speak about the true security of the nation. We have the capacity today to understand from history that every time that we did something worthwhile, we did it in unison with others. We are very good in our diplomacy and we are very much able to cooperate. We should not forget that today. We should not attempt to go at it alone. This doesn't work very well. But what works is what we had an alliance in the second war that we had to fight against the dark forces of fascism and National Socialism as they were facing us in Europe, in the Pacific, and all around the world. And we fought to the benefit of men who sacrificed all their tomorrows so we can have our freedom. In our case, Winston Churchill, he did one thing that was pivotal in bringing about victory, and that was, from the get-go, he tried to cultivate alliances. He made an effort to bring together disparate allies from other parts of the world, with different governments, with different ideologies, Whether they were members of the Commonwealth or not, it did not matter. Whether they had conflicting political views, it did not matter. He tried to cultivate great alliance with the communists just as much as with people who were royalists. He cultivated the first alliance with China, the son of Chiang Kai-shek, a general who was quite authoritarian. He cultivated an alliance with Stalin, who was definitely an authoritarian and a communist. And of course, he did his utmost to cultivate an alliance with the United States, with FDR. But Roosevelt, being under the influence of the democratic system, he was hesitant to take a stand. Other people joined the alliance earlier than the United States. United States waited until the last moment that we received this day in infamy 75 years ago, and Pearl Harbor here was devastated. And then we moved. Well, this old man, very sad at that moment, because for 2 years we had to fight the war alone in Europe, under overwhelming odds, and yet we persisted. But when this awful thing happened 75 years ago here in Pearl Harbor, people woke up. Should we wait again for another moment like that? I pose it as a question to you. Should we wait another terrible wake-up call like that before we are spurred to action? I don't know. Most people want to wait. Most people are placid, comfortable, obedient enough to say we should not rock the boat. Let international security, as lopsided as it is, maintain its course. But some of us, we have seen this movie before. We have seen the film, and we know it does not end well. And I say, action versus inaction is always a losing proposition. This is not of whether we should act or not act. This is just about doing the right thing and creating the necessary alliances that will allow us to not go to war, but to act with force, decisively, and remove the imminent threat of nuclear annihilation. That is all that is required. The concept, the grand concept of going and creating a major war or not, this is very old school, very old fashioned. We don't need that now. We have the capacity to do things without aspiring to make anything perfect. Let's not make perfect the enemy of the good. We have one problem, we should stick to that problem and bring all the evidence necessary that corroborates to how to solve that problem in alliance with the same four allies that they were the allied powers back at the conclusion of the Pacific War. Namely, China, United States, United Kingdom, and Russia. We were very good allies and victorious. And any one of you, I'm sure you have visited the Missouri and you've seen, when they signed up, the Articles of Surrender with Japan, there were those four major powers. Yes, there were others, mostly as witnesses. But those allies, we have to remotivate again today. We have to bring them together because our existence is mutually assured. Our capacity in preventing a nuclear engagement is beneficial for all of us. We share the same benefit of avoiding nuclear war that China has, Russia has, the United Kingdom as a representative of the European powers has. But we are the greatest beneficiary because we are tasked in this particular moment in time to be this empire of the mind that offers leadership to the world. 2,400 years ago, there was another person named Pericles of Athens, and he spoke in the midst of the war, in the midst of the Peloponnesian Wars, horrible wars in their standard, and he spoke about the city of light. A city very much like the United States today, into which you aspire to have the greatest ideas, and you shall not deny anyone who has goodwill from coming and joining up in our Commonwealth. We shall not deny any alliance with anybody, regardless of their style of government, regardless of their method of governing their bodies and their citizens. we have to seek the same strength of alliances today before we act. And then we have to act very decisively in order to avert the horrible threats that we are faced with. We all have analysis upon analysis upon analysis. There's a lot of intelligence floating around from very able agencies and bodies and individuals and think tanks. And all of that points to one fact. Our neighbors on the other side of the Pacific, they have been developing nuclear weapons. They have been developing the means of delivering those nuclear weapons. And they are up to no good. Do we know with precision how far they can reach? Maybe, maybe not. There is no infallibility in our intelligence agencies. But we know very much as a fact that today, with a nuclear missile, they can reach this very island where we stand. So if that does not alert you, if that does not make you feel like an ancient Akrita, to wake up and say, let's solve this minor problem before it gets to be an inevitability of historical proportion. Because then I assure you, we will go into a full-on mode of war, and we will bring out the big clouds, of nuclear winter and nuclear destruction, and that's going to be the death knell for the Northern Hemisphere for many years to come. That's going to be a complete environmental disaster, a complete environmental catastrophe. Our very species, our existence will be coming into question, whether we can survive a nuclear winter or not. So, what I'm saying is not a choice between action and inaction. It's a choice between acting now, decisively, forcefully, and successfully, without aspiring to all these crazy things like regime change or anything else. We just have one goal, to remove a certain nuclear capability of an enemy. That is all. We are not so much interested in their internal politics. Because, in my mind, and I've written a book about it, which I hope pretty near you will be able to find, what would Churchill do? So in my mind, peace, lasting peace, will not be forged through the muzzles of the guns that we have, will not be forged through the amazing military might that we possess. But lasting peace on this planet will be forged through different people, from different systems of governance, from different ideologies, from different religions, coming together and finding common ground to solve the very specific problems that they affect all of us. But to do that, we must remove the obstacles to that path of alliance and understanding. So, I hope I have not alarmed you too much with this, but reality is something that we have to wake up to. Reality is something that we have to address, because otherwise we will be negligent in recognizing the issues that we are faced with. And therefore, when I mentioned the nation being this great continuum from our forefathers to the children who have not been born, we will interrupt it, and that means we will fail. Therefore, your job as an Akritas will not be fulfilled. So I want to call you to action and to remind you that we are not here due to an accident of history. We are here as very intelligent people wanting to create a future and write new pages in the book of history that have not been written before. Therefore, we cannot allow anyone to stop us. Therefore, we cannot allow anyone to create this inevitability of events that will destroy our common future. And I ask for solution from you, because all of you, in your collective wisdom, you know a lot more about it than what I would ever know. But I will just give you the facts. And based on those, you can choose to respond and find a way to support whatever this government is doing, but with your own riches, to believe again that for the very interest of this particular part of the world and of the United States of America that we all love so much, that we have to stand up and we have to create the alliances necessary so we can act forcefully and decisively in order to avoid the inevitability of a nuclear Pearl Harbor, visiting this horror upon our collective head. Pretty terrible news for the morning, no? I apologize, but that is history. It is not easy to stomach. So I'm going to take a moment to ask you, is there any silver lining in this cloud? Does any one of you recognize that there is a silver lining in this ominous, dark storm cloud? And that is a valid question. I want your input. Please tell me. What are the positive things that emanate out of the sequence of events that we are facing with today? Please, my question. Yes, sir.
Some may think this naive, but the presence of a common enemy is one of...
Go ahead.
Some may think this naive, but at least to me, the presence of a common enemy seems to be one of the most significant drivers for global unity, if you go by the Second World War as an example. So in that case, I think that one silver lining is that if things go according to plan, then you can forge lasting partnerships that, if properly maintained, can make the world more secure after the crisis is resolved. That is, of course, if everything goes to plan.
Thank you. Any other ideas?
I have a question.
Yes, please, go ahead.
So I appreciate your comments, sir,
Thank you.
and you know, some great things to think about, but I'm going to come back to reality. And so no matter what the United States thinks and wants to form alliances, we just had Rex Tillerson go to the region and he talked with China, he talked with Japan. We have issues right now, if you're watching the press right now, all the stuff going on with Russia meddling in our elections. And so the reality right now to form an alliance with Russia, no matter how bad the Trump administration seems to want it, I don't see that happening with the collective Congress. China continues to have its own agenda. So to Elliot's point about having a common enemy, I don't believe China sees North Korea as a common enemy. So in essence, to form the alliances and breaking down the barriers, it's kind of like both sides need to open that up. And it's not just the US. I think China needs to change its behavior and other folks on the global scale. You see Japan stepping up to the plate with how they're changing their defense and stuff. So I think there's things happening, but with the City of Light and opening up for folks who join our alliances, I don't see China wanting to do that, or Russia, and anybody else for that matter. And UK's got issues right now with Brexit and other things. So the reality of it is a lot more complex than the thesis you lined out.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure.
I think one silver lining could be, we live in a time where diplomacy is based on dialogue. Not necessarily it has to be a forged alliance right away, but if you start a dialogue with these countries, as we know with diplomacy, it can get to a point where you can avoid a war or avoid a conflict, because if you already alienate the country and pose it as an enemy, like Dr. Nye said at the Pacific Forum dinner not too long ago for Dr. Basley. He said, if you already pose the person, China, whatever country, as your enemy, then they will become your enemy. But if you welcome them to dialogue and diplomacy, you can at least open that little door. And then it's up to the country, I think, to make that decision.
All right, so I tend to believe with Dr. Churchill, and the alternative is horrible. Do you realize one nuclear weapon today could take out the state of Texas? One weapon. And I want to embrace dialogue. I want to embrace Russia. I want to embrace China, okay? I want to embrace our worst enemies. But on another note, I want to ask Dr. Churchill a very pointed question. Would you have a preemptive strike against North Korea because they can launch a weapon? We cannot retaliate. It'll take out either Tokyo or Honolulu. Would you go in and selectively hit their nuclear weapon sites?
Thank you. So, these are great points that I have to address. And I start from Elliot. The silver lining in this dismal cloud is that we are finally forced to admit that we need a cooperation of great nations, regardless of the difficulties that we might have with them. I just have to remind you that when Winston Churchill was making an utmost effort to bring none other than Joseph Stalin into his friendship, into his alliance, he was doing fully knowing that he had an agreement between Molotov and Ribbentrop to dismember Poland, and each one of them have one half. He was cultivating an alliance with one of his arch enemies that he knew that their political systems, they were so alien to each other that they could not coexist. And yet, he recognized the necessity of making an alliance with communist Soviet Russia under the most bloodthirsty dictator, Joseph Stalin, for the best interests of humanity. And this alliance bare fruit at the end of the day. In the very same way, like he cultivated the alliance with Roosevelt and with the Chinese. Not just because there was a common enemy, but because the enemy was an existential threat. Once you get past the ideology, once you get past the personal differences and the petty difficulties that we have with other nations, we understand that if there is an existential threat, we all come together to address this. And of course, we will continue having discussions about our differences. Who has the best system? Who manages their affairs better? That will never go away. As long as we have humans, we will have variance of opinions. And in a democracy, we celebrate these opinions. But it is keenly important right now to understand that we cannot go at it alone. And the differences that we have with Russia today, I shall say, if you put them on the scale in comparison with what we had before the Second World War, you will find out that today's differences with Russia, they're minimal, negligible. Nothing to it almost. They try to imitate the system that we have. They want to have democracy, even though they are failing at it, they still make a decent effort. They try to have as much freedom as possible to give to the citizens. Well, you know, Dzerzhinsky Square, they don't have public executions anymore in Moscow. They take care through the law system and the courts to address the issues that they have. And I must say that if we need them, and if we understand that we need them, we might be willing to paint them with a better brush. And instead of giving them a mistreatment, then you can call them friends again, as we were obliged to do during the Second World War, and we addressed the Allied powers, and that included the four people I mentioned: Russia, China, United States, and United Kingdom. We need to build upon the best examples of when we were able to come together to address systemic existential threats to humanity. We've done it before, we can do it again. Nothing's stopping us except our mindset. And then, to go to your point, that we will be able to look at reality by neglecting the difficulties we have and sit down and have a wonderful effort together. I just remind you, I'm sure you had the feast of Christmas or Thanksgiving with your families. You were able to put aside the petty difficulties, psychological issues, and to sit together and enjoy and be grateful for having a family. Same thing here. We need to get together and offer Thanksgiving for being able to solve the problem collectively. Because if we do it that way, we shall avert major war. And if we don't do it that way, we run the risk of creating a major war. So, it's choices. And then I come to your point. Very valuable. What we heard at the Pacific Forum the other night. Yes, let's bring dialogue with people whose governments we don't agree with. But we find it necessary in order to promote the one goal that we have, which is security in the Pacific, security on this planet for all of us. That is the greatest common good, peace. I always say that. Some other people, they have a litany of things, like our friend who wrote the book, The Soft Power. He talks about other things, but he neglects to put on the top peace. Peace is the greatest good that we have, if we are able to keep it. But sometimes we have to fight, and I don't mean war, to your point. I mean exactly that. A surgical strike, an amazingly focused, laser-focused military effort to remove the nuclear threat. And that is all. No other ambitions about changing the regime, doing things. No ideological movement behind any of our actions. But a common agreement with our allies that we are just going to remove from the table the nuclear capacity of any nation to come up in the future wanting to claim nuclear status. Because we looked at the table. I'm a bit of a computer whiz, and a hacker, and we made a matrix of seeing the probabilistic theory of how it develops towards complete destruction of the people on this planet, the more nuclear states we have. It is fairly assured to the point of 99%.